Hey, this is Jason with Banna Properties, and today I want to answer the question, how much land do I need for a homestead farm? Okay, so homesteading actually is a term that started back in the 1800s, and there was a very interesting historical event that triggered this homesteading idea, and that was the American dream of owning land, and it started with the Homestead Act in 1862. Okay, so the Homestead Act was signed into law by Abraham Lincoln, and it was the plan to develop the West, to develop the western frontier. They had a lot of land in the West beyond the Mississippi River that was undeveloped. And so the idea was a homesteader could go with their family, any person over 21 years of age, and they could stake their claim to a quarter section of land. So in the United States, at least in the western half of the United States, all land is divided in blocks and sections. So a section is 1 mile by 1 mile, which is 640 square acres. So a quarter section will be 160 acres. So they could stake their claim and they would own the land. Now there were a couple of little catches to it, that you were required to live on the land. They needed to build some type of a residence on the land. They weren't allowed to leave it for more than 6 months. They had to cultivate for farming purposes a certain percentage of the land, and after 5 years they could then apply for property title. So there were many families that took up this opportunity. They took advantage of it, and that's how the West was developed by homesteaders. But the question you might have is it possible to still homestead today? And the answer is yes. Yes, it is. Okay, there's quite a homesteading movement that is happening today. It's alive now more than ever, and I think this has to do with many people who are becoming aware of all the fertilizer and pesticides and so many chemicals in food production today, many of them genetically modified and such. So there's quite a few people who want to live off the land, be self-sufficient, that's an important term in homesteading, and also would like to grow food organically without so many pesticides and harmful things that are little by little destroying their bodies, right? So how much acreage would a person need for homesteading? Okay, I do have a little experience in this. I actually have lived on a working homestead before. As a child, I lived on a mini farm, a 6-acre homestead with all types of animals, vegetable gardens that produced plenty of food for our family. And even as an adult with a young family, I also did some of this myself. When we talk about gardening, the first thing that a homesteader needs is they need a vegetable garden. They need some food production. Now, you don't have to own acreage to have a vegetable garden. I will say that my grandmother had a quarter-acre vegetable garden, and not only did she feed her family and but she was able to sell at a local farmer's market much of that produce as well. So it doesn't take a lot of space to produce very well in a vegetable garden. By some studies, they say 500 to 1,000 square feet is more than enough in garden space to produce enough vegetables for your family. Now, do keep in mind that unless you have a greenhouse, your vegetables are going to be seasonal. You're not going to produce during the winter months. Some homesteaders do use greenhouses, and they conquer that hurdle. But another option is to can food. Okay, so many different ideas. Some people do use raised beds or other types of stacking and building, and creative ways to take advantage of small spaces in their yard or on their homestead to produce vegetables. So gardening is the first step, but then the typical homesteader not only wants vegetables, but if they have enough space, they also want some animals. So I wanted to just take a quick look here at space needs for farm animals. So usually after gardening, the first stage is to get some chickens. Chickens not only can provide meat, but they can provide eggs. And this is a great staple for homesteaders. If you don't have a lot of space, if you're limited on space, you could simply put a chicken coop and pen up in the corner of your property. About a half a dozen to a dozen chickens could more than feed and provide enough eggs for a family on a daily basis. However, it says here about up to 10 square feet per bird. Now, if you want free-range chickens, you want them to roam around, you're going to need a little more space. They claim for 1 acre you can have about 50 free-range chickens. Now, it depends on what else you have on the acre. You don't want them free-ranging and ruining all the other plants, so you'd have to have some kind of fencing and space. Now, 30 to 40 square foot per calf, 40 to 80 square foot each as they grow. A typical rule of thumb with cattle, a cow and calf pair to graze for 12 months will usually need 1.5 to 2 acres of grazing space. For goats, right here it says about 0.2 to 0.3 pasture acres per goat, and sheep as well. Now, something else to keep in mind is that you can also feed them hay. If you don't have enough pasture, you could possibly buy some hay bales, maybe from a neighbor, and you could also use that to feed if you're at the limits in your size. So let's kind of play around with the idea of acreage here. A 1 acre homestead, right? Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. It's very tight, but it is possible. Here's a rendering, an artist's rendering of what a 1 acre home site would look like, possibly, potentially could look like. You can see that you have a cow and a pig over there. Personally, I'm not sure I'd want a pig on my 1 acre homestead because it could get a little smelly there. However, 1 or 2 pigs would be fairly clean. You could see quite the gardening operation. There are some fruit trees around. Do notice though that there's not much of a driveway to the house. Okay, so that is going to consume some of your space. So 1 acre is going to be pretty tight to homestead with. 1 acre, in my opinion, would be a perfect size for a vegetable garden and some poultry, adding some laying hens. It would be a great way to start. However, 3 to 10 acres would make a very good small homestead. You can add some livestock. You could maybe have some goats, maybe a cow. You can add a little bit of chickens free ranging around there, plus your vegetable garden, no problem. If you get 10 to 50 acres, you can have a full-size homestead farm on this with multiple types of livestock. You can even rotate pastures. You could actually even produce vegetables or produce to sell at local markets, and you could do quite a bit with that amount of land. Right? I hope this video has been a help to you, and maybe you have a piece of property that you wanted a homestead on, but you've decided not to, and you're looking to sell it. If you'd like a cash offer for your land, you can go ahead and fill out the form here on our site, and we'd love to give you a cash offer for your property within 24 hours. Thank you.